All right, guys. I'm with the person who needs no introduction. I don't know if you guys can kind of get the rebrand of the channel, the vibe of the channel, but we're bringing in a lot more guests in the community. I'm trying to do this at least 1 to 2 times a week. Obviously, working with Zach and working on the draft guide and doing things like that. That's a mainstay. But to be able to get this guy who is he's a mainstay and he's a headliner of his own.
Wow.
He's doing Locked On. He doesn't even know this, but I used to actually listen to the podcast before I would watch the podcast. So I'm a big fan of him and Marcus Mosher. Ladies and gentlemen, Landon McCool. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you so much for having me back, and I love the show so much, and love the vibe of the new rebrand, of how the change of the show, mixing it up. I mean, really, really great stuff, and it's always great to chat with you.
Landon, before we dive into obviously the news of Osa Odighizuwa's contract, because I want your high level thoughts on that, right? I think that I wanted to get, because we haven't talked all off season, and you do a great job of, I don't think there's a better designer of laying out what's going on with the Cowboys than you. I think you're great with that. I think everybody kind of has their niche, but it's like when it comes to like an overall like summary, like if you want to get the cliff notes of the Dallas Cowboys, and I mean this in a great way, because like he can give you some draft, he can give you free agency, he can give you the team's vibe. He's been doing this for a long time. I think, Landon, you do a great job of this. So, Landon, how did you feel, first of all, how the Mike situation, the Shoddy situation, and now where we are right now?
Oh, man, we're peeling all the way back.
Let's peel just a little. You can give me the cliff notes, but let's peel back.
Great.
Landon.
Well, I felt like, the whole way that, and first of all, let me just say that feels like 2 years ago now,
doesn't it?
I mean, that feels like when you said Mike at first, I was like, Mike,
Mike,
I was Micah. Is that who he's talking about? First of all, the way the whole thing kind of unfolded, it seemed very clear. Let me actually go back even further. I actually think that, in my opinion, that the real inflection point for this franchise was them losing that Green Bay game the previous season, right? And to me, at that point, I think I've definitely been accused of being too rosy on the Cowboys, of being too optimistic at times. But I think I'm fair if I'm tooting my own horn. I think even I saw that after that game that things needed to change, right? Yes. And that the Cowboys could not continue to do what they were doing. And I was normally a supporter of hanging around the rim and then hoping to tipping it, because I do think that there's something to, if you have a high floor of a franchise, sometimes things will just break right. You get the right schedules, you get health, right? It just falls right. You get into the tournament and then it happens, right? And the problem is that all those things happen for the Cowboys. Like, the one thing that I think you could say about Mike McCarthy is that he did a really great job of keeping the Cowboys healthy and getting into the tournament, and then giving them an opportunity at home against a low seed. And the Cowboys, like, let's say it, they folded like a cheap suit, man. Yeah. They played terribly. And we can go round and round about what it was or who it was or who's to blame. And there's always, of course, a huge segment of the population that wants to just blame one thing when it's obviously 8 things, right? So at that point, to me, it's like, why are we trying to continue to play whack-a-mole with this problem? Yeah. It's time to just get rid of everything that we feasibly can and start fresh, right? Mm-hmm. And so fast forward to, obviously, them re-signing Dak Prescott, them re-signing the keeping Mike McCarthy, and then just the organizational chaos of going into the last year with the lame duck year. All of this is a very long-winded way of saying, Foots, I think that the Joneses agreed with me. Yeah. I think that the Joneses wanted to get rid of Mike McCarthy after the Green Bay game, but they didn't want to pay Mike McCarthy a lame duck salary while also paying a new head coach's salary. So I think what you saw in the 2024, and I think the ultimate sin of the Joneses really was that they just weren't honest with us. If they had just been honest and said, hey, this is, we need to get our because the other element of why Green Bay was so disappointing is because after that game was over, you had something like 20 plus free agents that were obviously you weren't going to be able to re-sign a majority of them. Dorrance Armstrong had already signed a low-cost team-friendly deal and had continued to blow up. You knew he was going to leave. Tyler Biadasz had played just well enough that you knew that he was going to get signed by somebody, but not well enough that you really necessarily wanted to re-sign him yourself. And then all these other guys. So it clearly was already an inflection point, and it was just felt weird that the Cowboys didn't take that opportunity to kind of lean into it. And the truth of the matter is that they did actually. They just didn't tell us. They just didn't tell us while saying they were all in, which, to be fair to Jerry, that was not even a reference to being all in on that year. That was a reference to being all in on the core of that team, which is still here. I think that they just used the year as a salary dump year, as a, hey, let's get our cap in a better order. Let's get through this season with Mike McCarthy we still have left. And then this was going to be a year for reset. And I think so far we've seen that sort of play out a little bit. And I think that kind of can lead us a little bit into the Osa conversation if you want. But actually, sorry, before we do, the Schottenheimer hire. So we get through all that, right? And so, and now it's time to hire a head coach. And I think at that point, right before the Schottenheimer hire, I was at my highest level of
I'm out.
Of frustration with the team, without a doubt. Like, it's just like this whole process seems flawed. I can't get behind it. The Schottenheimer hire to me seemed exactly the opposite of what I would like. Remember what I was just saying? I wanted them to kind of start over. I wanted them to kind of get fresh. The Schottenheimer hire felt like having Kellen Moore in the building when you hired Mike McCarthy, where it was just this kind of long, continuous string of things that weren't working, right? And then you hear Schottenheimer's plan, and you hear him talk about bringing in all these guys, and he's going to change the culture. And he talks about very specific things about wanting to be physical, about wanting to improve the run game. And guess what? He actually does something about it. He brings in an offensive coordinator who is an offensive line coach that helps you unlock that to really actually develop your offensive line, really to get the core of what you need your offense to be to get better. You get another offensive line coach from the college ranks. You find a defensive, wide receiver coach from the college ranks. You go out and you get guys who aren't just like other people named Schottenheimer or friends that he knew from exactly. They aren't hiring like I don't remember what Rob's last name was, but the assistant head coach that Mike McCarthy had, who was just basically Mike McCarthy's buddy that was like on the staff. Like these guys, like the hirings made sense with the vision that Brian Schottenheimer laid out in the press conference. And the fact that those things were lining up and this offseason seems to be lining up and they're actually, putting motion to what they're saying.
Yes.
I think that all bodes really well. So this is all a really long way of saying I've reached the lowest lows that I probably felt as a Cowboys fan in the last 6 months. But I think that over the course of the last few, weeks or months, right, we started to see this build back up. We started to see them kind of at least Schottenheimer. I don't know about the Joneses, right?
Yeah.
Schottenheimer building trust with the fan base by telling us what he's going to do and then following through with it. And then for the Joneses' sake, look, I think today was a big domino that fell, right? They made it clear that they needed to get Osa done early and that because they wanted to start on Micah so that they could get into free agency in a spot where they needed to go. And what have we heard? They signed Osa. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, in a bit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We've heard that they're already starting. They've approached Micah's team, and they've already started negotiations there. I've been saying with Marcus for a while, don't listen to their lips. Guys, stop listening to what they're saying. Watch their feet. What are they doing? I think that they've matched their actions with their words. And I think so far, it's been a good step.
Landon McCool, ladies and gentlemen, he's such a wealth of knowledge. I didn't want to stop you. I didn't want to jump in just because you're right. I think that people actually have to follow what's literally happened. And now I'm going to tell you this, Landon, and I don't know how you feel, and I don't do big with the conspiracies and this, that, and the third. But I will say this. I now am at 1,000% sure that Stephen Jones was out on Mike McCarthy after Green Bay. Just from what I'm just in which in which the speed of which things are getting done, Landon. I mean, we were sitting around last year on day 4, 5, 6 of free agency, and people were and I don't think there will be a barrage of free agents signed this year. I don't think that, but I do think that you will see a Cowboys team that is active. But if you listen to how Steven talks about Brian, if you listen to how Will talks about Brian, those two, and they hold a lot of weight in the Cowboys organization, were out on Mike McCarthy. Would you agree on that, Landon?
Yeah. Well, I certainly would agree that Will is speaking differently about Brian Schottenheimer than I ever heard him speak about Mike McCarthy. I'd also say this, like, I do think that this may have been the first not Jerry-driven head coach hire that we've ever seen, right? Yeah. Like, I think that this is a Stephen Jones and Will McClay hire, and if we take them at their word, and they were so blown away by what happened in the interview. I think that they love the idea of change with some remaining string to the past a little bit, so there's a transition there. I think that it makes a lot more sense, and it's certainly, look, without any information, like in that period before the Schottenheimer press conference, we were all pulling our hair out, man. What's going on? Why is Brian? This guy didn't even call. And I'll be clear, I still have issues. He didn't call plays last year. Not only is he calling plays this year, but he has to be a head coach as well. And I think that that's a really huge step to be taking up from where he is. I think he's immensely qualified, as far as experience, having play calls, been around a lot of really good head coaches who were callers at times at different points. So I think he's about as ready as you can be for a first-time head coach. But I think that it is a big step up. But I will say this, he's answered the call there by making the kind of hires and the kind of offensive structure around him that's really supportive. I mean, you've got a former play caller as your passing game coordinator, and you've got a guy who specifically is your offensive coordinator that is, not a play caller, who can also give you a lot of support. So I just think that, and then having a defensive coordinator who can be autonomous, right? A former head coach. I think that really helps. So I think, that's the one thing that I worried about, is that, even if Schottenheimer is good at this, like, is this too much to buy, to take a chunk out of, because you're doing play calling and you're a first-time head coach. So we'll see. I do like the structure he's built around him, though.
The structure and what you said, putting a pin in something that you said, let's follow what they do. So what did they do? They got Osa done before the tag deadline. I think that is these small wins, right? Not hiring your friends, hiring people who may even be smarter than you when it comes to blocking scheme. I'm going to tell you right now, like, the deep dives I've been doing on Connor Riley, that dude's a legend, as far as, like, he's clearly like a massive upgrade from Mike Solari. And so when you get to some of these hires, and now you see, okay, there's a guy in Osa who, I'm going to ask you a few things about Osa, but bro, they're finally moving proactively. And this is what I'll say. There's a faction of fans who, I think we have the best content creators, the best reporters. We have people who are really thoughtful in the community. And it's crazy to think that this was a bad signing. If you watch the games in a down year, you saw a guy in Osa Odighizuwa who, playing hard. Go watch the Commanders game. Him and Micah wrecked that game. You get what I'm saying to you? And the tackles for loss are up. The sacks were up. And I'm more the disruptor versus the sack guy. Like, Micah's going to always have high sack numbers because he's just a mismatch. But if you can give me a 3-tech that can, affect the game, push the pocket, be a pest in that way, you're going to pay.
This production, man.
That's it. Disruption is production, Landon. So I think it's a huge signing. And I just want to get your overall thoughts. Where do you land on the Osa signing? Because for me, I love it. For me, it's not going to force the Cowboys to go into the draft and take a Walter Nolan or, insert said 3 tech that you like, and you still might go D tackle, but you're not forced to. How do you feel about the signing?
Well, and more importantly, you're not forced to make that person be the source of your pass rush in an all-important position in Eberflus's defense. Let me answer it this way. I was having a conversation with, I can't remember who it was, maybe John Owning, about the Deebo Samuel trade, right? And our general conversation was that, it was Marcus. Our general conversation was that the general consensus, the general fan is about a year and a half behind on how good a player actually is, right? Like, however, the general, like anytime a name flashes up on a trade or something, the general consensus of that player is about a year and a half behind the reality of that player. Deebo Samuel being a great example. Deebo Samuel had less receiving yards than Jalen Tolbert last year. Or no, wait, he had more receiving yards, but Jalen Tolbert had twice as many touchdowns and more first downs on less targets. So, I mean, not exactly a guy that should be like breaking news, with who he is currently. I think that situation is even worse with the general consensus on player salaries. People have just lost the plot on what is a normal amount of money to pay a free agent, top of the market defensive tackle. Guys, $20 million is not what it used to be. All right. Like it's just not. Like it used to be that the best player at defensive tackle in football, or the best player in all of football, would be making $20 million. Quarterbacks, oh my God, who's making $20 million? Like, guys, it's funny because we all see the tweets, we all see the social media about the exploding cap, right? And these cap numbers are getting huge, and we're all pressuring the owners to spend this money. But then when the numbers come out and these guys get paid, they're like, he's not worth that. He's not worth that. No matter what the number is, guys. Literally, he is worth that. Like, I mean, the cap,
he literally actually is, and you don't have D tackles on this team.
If you had not signed him, you would have been paying him $5 million more this year than his highest cap number all throughout the length of this contract. First of all, let's start with the 10,000-foot view of this, right? Yes. Just to kind of tie it into what we were talking about earlier. It's just another step, right? First of all, I would have told you that there's no way the Cowboys are re-signing Osa. If you before all this, before I think it was Mike Fisher's report that he was potentially going to sign for $21 million. I would have told you that the Cowboys were not signing Osa and that they were going to have to figure this out. And it was something I was worried about because pass rushing defensive tackle is impossible to find. Like ready-made pass rusher, interior pass rusher. Like you can't draft that guy. You can draft Walter Nolan all you want. You draft Mason Graham if you want. I don't know that you're going to get immediately off the bus the kind of pass rusher that Osa Odighizuwa is. So
the type of pass rusher, the motor, all of it. I get very deep class, but pro level strength. We've seen immediately. We've seen how long it takes to get Mozzie going. So yes.
I think even the better guys, it just takes a while, right? The game's a little bit faster, it's a little bit more violent, and you're playing in the fastest, most violent part of the field. So I think that on that level, it shows organizational clarity, which has always been an issue, I think, with this team. We're starting to see more and more of that. And then just on the player, like, look, I mean, he's a top 5 pass rushing defensive tackle. We can haggle about the ability to stop the run, but guys, there are tons of other ways to fix that. And I don't think that Osa is necessarily getting moved out of his hole, but he's also just not a guy that I want corkscrewing down double teams either. So if you get another nose tackle in there, he's perfectly fine to disrupt the run, either penetrating or just keeping his hole. And then I think you can work around the runs other ways, but you're just not going to find another pass rushing defensive tackle in free agency that isn't Milton Williams, who's probably going to cost you more, or in the draft where you're going to have to draft them and then hope that he develops into Osa like a year or two from now, which again is not exactly the right kind of timeline we want. So I think it makes a ton of sense. I agree. I still think that the Cowboys should be going and getting another defensive tackle in this draft, just because this is an incredible draft for defensive tackles. And, just because you have Mozzie and Osa doesn't mean you're not going to need more bodies there. Yeah. Get more bodies at the defensive line. I think you need it.
A few things I want to touch on there, Landon. Again, this is what you do, and you do it at a high level. A great description. So this is what I kind of wanted to harp on with Cowboys fans when it's too much and it's this. Well, first of all, you don't have anybody next to Mozzie. You don't even know what the plan is for Mozzie, and I think this whole we can't stop the run thing has gotten lost in translation. First of all, I thought as the year went on, Zimmer did a much better job. When the offense was able to put pressure on the other team's defense, we stopped the run. It was games where we couldn't score. The defense goes back out there. Okay, now you can't stop the run. I thought that, again, that's not on Osa. That's on the philosophy. I didn't think
100%. It's
Dan Quinn's defenses, even in Washington, they are setting up to have a complete letdown depending on if they don't eat their vegetables in the draft and in free agency. If they go out chasing a bunch of weapons, don't handle their interior offensive line and defense. This isn't talking Commanders, but again, I can see it because they could not stop the run at all. And so
they're not surprising anybody next year either.
And they're not surprising anybody. And Dan Quinn's always been known for that. People actually need to go do research on just how well Matt Eberflus's defenses have been against the run with really not the best names. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't attack the position, but the way he coaches fundamentals, play your gaps, play your assignments, be where you're supposed to be, exceptional linebacker play, like that's what he does. I wanted to ask you this. Mm-hmm. When they drafted these guys in 2021, okay, Micah out of Penn State, Golston out of UCLA, first team all Pac-12. I mean, he's been a guy. Did you think that he would be this? Because I'll be honest with you, I was ecstatic that they brought him back. By the way, Landon, we almost have 400 people in the chat, and I'm pretty sure 300 of those people are here for you because, I mean, you're the I just want to say that. I just want to throw you that bone. But no, did you think he would be this? He's never missed a game, clean off the field. I think, and you tell me, Landon, I think he's still getting better. And I'm working on that. I'm working on a piece. He's only 26. Yeah. We've seen some of these D tackles continue to ascend. So did you think he would be this? And how do you feel about him?
Listen, I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I did. I was.
Well, you're on the West Coast.
So there's some of that for sure. Osa was my pet cat of that draft, actually.
Wow.
And folks should go back and listen. I was ecstatic when they got Osa because, listen, here's the thing. He's undersized, obviously, but obviously he's made that work, right? You just mentioned he hasn't missed a game, I think, or he missed one game due to COVID, right? Is that what it was?
I think he had one missed game due to COVID illness.
Look, I love interior offensive line and defensive tackles that were wrestlers, right? Wrestling is just such a great foundation for playing in the middle of the line because you understand leverage, you understand flexibility, you understand how to get low and use that power. And then on top of that, if anybody knows a wrestler or anybody who's done any wrestling, you know that those dudes work and work and work and work, and when they're done, they work some more, right? They just run all day and so those guys have incredible endurance. I just think it's such a great foundation. You see it in his game, right? Like, he is undersized, he's not tall, he's not weight, but the way he works is he's powerful. He gets lower than you and he explodes in through the gap, and he's flexible and can contort his body. I actually have been a fan of his since he came out because of the elements about Osa that I think really add into it. I also think too, there's something to the idea of not genetics, but the pedigree necessarily, but his brother, even though his brother kind of went into the league and dealt with a lot of injuries and stuff, you knew that he had the kind of physical prowess to be able to handle that sort of play in the NFL, even though obviously the injury situation, which that was more of carryover, but you just knew that this is a guy that potentially could come in with that, even being slightly undersized and had the power and the leverage to handle the life in the middle. I will say this, I didn't expect him to be as good as he was right away. I thought it would take a little bit, but I always knew that if he hit, he was going to be a really good player.
Landon McCool. Landon, I want to ask you this, and then I'll let you go. We restructured CD's money. Mm-hmm. It's sounding like Dak's money could be restructured. Just from everything that we saw, we kind of detailed that, it's starting to sound like Steven is in on Brian. He's in on moves wanting to be made. And if you think about it, I mean, it makes sense. If you don't know if Mike's going to be here next year, why would you bring in a bunch of free agents in, make a bunch of long-term investments on guys that you don't know, and you don't know if the coach is going to – like I tell people, like this window is still open for this team to be good because the quarterback, it has to be. This is not, a Bo Nix where you have a few years to play with it. And, you at the end of the day, you could do some things on a rookie contract. You need to figure out this thing and try to get going now. And I think that's part of why Brian Schottenheimer was hired, because he was here to see some of the warts. He apparently he bit his tongue on certain things that, he never talked bad about Mike. But at the end of the day, it sounded like there were changes that need to be made. It sounds like, and from the look of the way that the front office is moving, everybody's moving a certain way and differently this year. Now that the restructure with CD is done, it was funny hearing him say, he needs help to win, and his tweet and all that. Well, CD, they were going to do it regardless, whether you.
Yeah, you weren't involved, buddy. Like you didn't even get a call about this. So yeah,
it was done. They're going to possibly get Dak done. What else would you like to see Landon to say, okay, this team gets it?
I think signing Micah, is a big deal. I think because it just lays the table for exactly how and what you can
set the table,
how things are all kind of laid out. I think that's kind of the next big thing. And look, I don't want them to go out and go crazy in free agency. That's not what I need to see. But I need to see them make efforts to use free agency to improve areas of team that can be improved in free agency. Like I think that overall Cowboys fandom is like, they've been pointed in the direction of free agency as the solution, and that's the problem. And they look at what the Eagles did and they think that's the way out of this. And I do think that the areas that the Cowboys need to be better about is when those opportunities are there to take those opportunities. But I also think that there is limits to that, and that this is not a great free agent market this season specifically to try to prove everybody wrong about whether or not you'll spend money in free agency, because it may not be exceptional. But if a player gets cut from a team for a salary reason, or a guy that isn't a fit with the new franchise and a new coaching regime gets let go, and maybe he's a fit for your team, and the money's right, like take the opportunity, right? Take the chance. And I do think that, look, spending some money in free agency does mean like going out and getting a tier 2 level guy, maybe not like the top guy the first day of free agency, but not being afraid to get maybe 1 or 2 $10 million plus a year free agents at positions where you need it, just to shore up certain spots so you're not having to draft for need when you get into the draft. Because look, I think there are certain positions it's okay to go into the draft with needs, like running back, because there are like 40 of them that you could draft. There's literally so many of them. Yeah. But I do think that if you want to improve the team, you need to do a better job. And they've talked about this. They need to do a better job of using all avenues to try to improve. And that includes obviously free agency, the trade market. How can we use the trade market? Who's looking to get rid of people that we can trade resources for? And paying attention to who's getting cut because of like regime change and salary dumps, that sort of thing. They've done a great job of that in the past. I think that there's been a lack of willingness because of all the things we talked about with McCarthy and all the timelines of everything. Those restrictions are no longer here. Go take advantage of available opportunities and make this team better. Because I agree, the core of this team is extremely good. You've got a pass rusher, you've got a pass catcher, you've got a quarterback. Those are the 3 hardest things in the NFL to probably find. You've got a cornerback, right? You got a guy who can cover the quarterback, the wide receivers. You've got the pieces to suddenly make this team very good. I really don't think this team is far off from being competitive if they can just be aggressive this offseason and kind of filling the gaps around those stars.
Landon, it's so interesting because I'm looking like, hey, what would it look like getting Bond may be out of our price range, Greenlaw may be out of our price range, but some type of a linebacker in here with, it sucks because you lost Overshown the way he was trending. You feel really good if he was healthy. But I'm looking at maybe linebacker, tackle. This is Foots' offseason plan, right? I think there's a world, Landon, if you say, you know what, if you can give me a free agent linebacker who we can come in at least get us to like Nick Vigil, but more of a special team or backup type. If you could give me a linebacker to pair with Luafau, because it's just Damone Clark is one of Dan Quinn's guys that's out. So you get a linebacker in here to pair with Luafau until Overshown, if he even plays next year, we don't even know. I mean, it's you feel awful for the guy. So you get a linebacker, then you go the later days when it comes to D tackle, because I don't think that there'll be, the first D tackles in the market in this class of free agency. I don't see that happening free agency wise. But I do think, and this is, I don't know how you feel, I do think they need to be extremely aggressive. Everybody's talking about receiver. You need to be aggressive cornerback. I've said it, and I don't know. I did a piece on it, Landon. I don't know how you feel. I don't have any faith in Trevon Diggs. I just don't.
Yeah.
You what you said, hey, you maybe need to be ahead of where players are, fans are behind on if players are good. I think fans are also a year behind when a player is really in decline. And even him posting that he was doing rehab, that's just you saying that, look at me, I'm doing rehab, when every report, you talk to people, and I talk to people. That's our job, to get you guys information. It's been widely well known around that building that Diggs isn't working hard. He was not taking rehab serious. His production is dropped. At the end of the day, I'm out, because the same fan base that'll get mad for not paying players, you paid Diggs and he turned into a pumpkin. I just have to be honest with you all. Didn't want to tackle. You're going after reporters. Well, all this stuff starts to do what, Len? And I'm just like, you know what? If nothing else, and hey, I love Diggs as much as anybody when the interceptions were happening, but they're not anymore. And so if nothing else, we need to cover ourselves at outside corner. I do believe that Jay Lou will be back, but I don't. Well, yeah. What do you think about corner, Landon? Because I think that that's a big need.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think, honestly, we were just talking about like what's next, and obviously Micah was what I said, but if we're talking about what's probably literally next, right? As far as the next thing to fall, I hope that, I'm going to wake up someday in the next week, hopefully before the next week, to the news of J-Lou signing a re-signing with the Cowboys, because I agree. I look, I mean, whether you want to believe, look, take the reports, what you're hearing about Diggs out of it, right? Just what you know about the injury, right? Yes. Just what you know about the recovery from the injury, right? It's scary. And the Cowboys have an out here, if a financial out, if they want to find their way out of this. And here's the other part about this, obviously, that's scary, is that you're working on a timeline that includes Deron Bland, right? Because at a certain point, you need to figure out whether you want to pony up the money to pay a top cornerback, because you probably can't afford both of them at the same time, right? So if you want to lay the groundwork to sign Bland and let go of Diggs, you're going to need to start doing that soon. And I wouldn't be shocked if it was this year. I wouldn't be shocked. I won't be shocked if they find a way to kind of either move him off or they get rid of him before the end of the year. Right? I before the season starts, maybe even. So we got to look at what his timeline looks like, his health and everything. There's just I think there's a lot of unknown there, and that's the point, right? Yeah. Is that's why you've got to sign Jay Lewis, because really Lewis is a sure thing, and I understand that this is probably the best market he's going to have in his career at this point, but. And I also understand he doesn't play the same position as Diggs. Like that's another thing. But you just can't afford to have both as a gap to fill, right? Yes. Like you've got to have two of your three starting corners kind of taken care of if you're going to try to deal with, not having your potential star corner either it's ready to go for the season or on your team at all. So, look, I've been eyeballing corners in the draft a little bit. I've been, seeing just to see what's available in free agency, because I do think it's something that the Cowboys and everybody, kind of has to look around at and see, how long is this situation going to last if he's, if he's got a potential microfracture recovery that he's got to come back from. I mean, I'm an old man, so I remember what Anthony Spencer's situation was, and that was an ugly. And I understand it's been a long time since then, and that's why we're even talking about him potentially playing. But I think it's not something that I want to invest in long term. And if the runway is running out for us to get Bland on a deal, I would rather go down that route, because I think Bland is the epitome of the type of player that you want in your locker room and on your team.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, Landon McCool, I can't wait to listen back to this. I learned so much today just being with this guy. Again, humbled to have people like this in the community. Landon, Vach, Brian, everybody who's joined. I actually had one of your coworkers on from Locked On Bears, Lauren Cox, really sharp dude. It's been an honor talking with you, Landon. I want to get you back on next month to do some draft stuff. I know how busy you are, and I know you're running your pod every day. But if you guys aren't already, make sure that you guys subscribe to Locked On Cowboys. Him and Marcus Mosher do a great job. Mosher is really strong in the community. Landon is really strong in the community. If you want great information, you guys need to be subscribed to Landon McCool. Landon, any closing thoughts before you go, buddy?
No, man, this is great. It's always great to talk Cowboys. And listen, I've been very frustrated, and so it's great to chat with folks and just kind of get out in the community a little bit, because everyone's feeling a different way about it. But I also think it's important to foster hope in the community, right? Even when things feel down, the football bounce is oblong and it bounces very oddly. And I think that applies from the 10,000-foot view as well. So chances are always kind of changing for every team every year, and every season is completely different than the previous. So don't give up hope quite yet.
Don't give up hope. And if you guys are following people who aren't clickbaiting you, i.e. ESPN, or they're just rewinding the same Dak Prescott narrative or whatever, this team, Jerry, whatever. I mean, hell, if you want to really see change, Jerry, this is the quietest I've ever seen Jerry Jones. I'm actually kind of nervous, knock on wood, to make sure nothing is nothing.
That was my first worry, right? Is that he didn't show up? Everyone was just like, so and I was like, no, maybe we should be concerned. This is a octogenarian who's traveled to a cold area and is he may have health issues. I think people forget sometimes that they're actually people, and so there actually could be some stuff that you have to worry about as he gets older. That sometimes he's an old man and he can't make it to things.
Yeah, I mean, so just there. If you're listening to the right people, whether it's the draft, whether it's myself, whoever, if I'm not your cup of tea, maybe Locked On, maybe Vosh, maybe Brian, maybe 105.3. But if you're listening and sifting through the minutia, I'm telling you guys, I just have a feel that things are going to be different. And the reason why I say that is because they've not just said this. I know you were wrapping up, Landon, but I said this, and if you go back and you watch some of these interviews, this is the first time I've ever heard a staff, and starting with the head coach, have a clear, concise message: physical violence. Not like, hey, we want to play football the right way, not just the coach speak. It's literally, if you listen to Adams, hey, we want to be physical and violent. When you listen to the running backs coach, Landon, hey, we want to be physical and violent. These guys have to play football with a physical brand, violent brand. And when you listen to Schottenheimer, hey, we want to put together a kick-ass staff, and we want to play physical and violent.
That's what they've done. That's what they've done. And again, that's how you build trust. You tell us what you're going to do, and then you do it. That's pretty basic. And that was the problem last year. So far, it feels like maybe things have changed. And maybe that's because the coach has been given the free reign to do what he wants to do more so than the coach had last year.
Yes, I completely agree. Landon McCool, thank you so much for joining, buddy. You guys, I will put the description box. I will put the link to Locked On Cowboys in the description link. And as always, guys, thank you all for liking, sharing, subscribing. It's your boy Footsdaking. I love you all. Peace.